So this is a continuation of our math workshop on problems involving equations. So in this video, we're going to focus on additional practice problems. So in this sample problem, we're actually going to focus on writing an equation. So in this question, Mike earns $6.50 per hour plus 4% of his sales. So we're going to translate all of that into an equation. So another type of equation problem you'll encounter involves writing an equation. Mike earns $6.50 per hour plus 4% of his sales. Enter an equation for Mike's total earnings, E, when he has X hours and has a total of Y sales in dollars. So all of that can be kind of confusing. So take a breath. Let's break it all down. I usually like to highlight key things. So total earnings is represented by the letter E. You know what? Let me highlight that. So total earnings is represented by E. And hours is represented by the variable X. And sales is represented by the variable Y. All right, so let's look at what we know. We know that Mike is earning $6.50 per hour. What that really translates to in math terms is it's $6.50 times hours. So that's what that really means when he earns $6.50 per hour. That per usually means multiplying. Plus 4% of his sales. So 4% of his sales. And again, that of usually it means that we're multiplying of his sales. Now we need to simplify all of that into a neatly packaged equation. So first of all, let's look at that word hours. We've learned that hours is represented by the letter X. So what we can do is write it out. So his total earnings, we're trying to write an equation for total earnings. So his total earnings is going to equal $6.50 times hours. But from this problem, we know that hours is going to be represented by the variable X. So instead of writing out hours, we're going to write out X plus, it's pretty easy to translate that plus. So let's add that plus sign. 4% of his sales. So 4% of sales. Now 4%, we can't just write 4% into our equation. What 4% actually means is 4 over 100 times the number of sales he has. So what that means is we're going to need to simplify that 4 over 100. And since we already have a $6.50, we already have a decimal in our equation, we're probably not going to want to add a fraction. We're going to want to add a decimal in there. So let's simplify 4 over 100 into a decimal form. So that's 0.04. And sales. So instead of writing the word sales, we're going to look at the additional information that is given, and we realize that sales is actually represented by the term Y. So instead of writing sales out, we're going to write Y. And it's as simple as that, creating an equation for yourself. So now all we have to do is enter our answer. For equation type problems, you'll notice that it's very similar. You'll always enter a number, an equation, a polynomial. So it involves using this keypad, and it's very important to get familiar with this keypad. And notice how this is slightly different from the problem that we did earlier. There's now a square root function, there's pi, there's the letter E, so it actually takes that word problem and adds the variables in there. So we're going to type out our answer now. We're going to do big E, because that represents total earnings, equals $6.50 per hour, so X, plus 4%, which is 0.04 of his sales, which is the letter Y. And that's all we have to do. And then we'll enter our answer. And just remember, double check that you've typed your answer in correctly, and then you can go ahead and submit. All right, so in this next sample problem, we're going to simplify an equation. In this problem, we need to multiply and combine like terms to determine the product of these polynomials. So we're going to need to simplify everything by first multiplying all the terms out. So we'll distribute that 2x squared. So we'll take 2x squared times 4x, which is 8x cubed. Then we're going to multiply that next term, 2x squared times negative 7xy, which is going to give us negative 14x cubed y. And we're going to distribute to the next term, 2x squared times 5, which is going to give us 10x squared. Let's close off that parentheses. And now times 3y minus 2. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows this can get, it's pretty straightforward. However, you can make small mistakes here and there because there are so many steps and so many terms to handle. So what you'll want to do is just take your time and make sure as you're going, you're checking your math. It's very easy to multiply incorrectly, forget a negative, or even forget to add the exponents as you're multiplying them. So just take your time, make sure every step is correct along the way. So now we're going to take that 3y and distribute it to the other terms. So 3y times 8x cubed, which is going to give us 24x cubed y. Now 3y times negative 14 x cubed y is going to give us negative 42 x cubed y squared. Now we're going to take that 3y and multiply 10x squared. So we get 30x squared y. Now we're going to take that negative 2 and multiply it out. We're going to get negative 16x cubed. Multiply that negative 2 by negative 14x cubed y. We're going to get positive 28x cubed y. Take that negative 2, multiply it by 10x squared. We're going to get 20x squared. So now we're almost there. Notice how we have several terms. We have 6 different terms, so it's very easy to make a small calculation anywhere along the way. So again, take your time, make sure you're not making small calculation errors. So now we're going to scan our polynomial and check for like terms. So we have x cubed y and x cubed y squared. Those are not like terms because that exponent on that y is different. And then we have x squared y. That's also a different term, x cubed. Right here, I see a x cubed and y and a x cubed and y. So those are like terms, and we're going to combine those like terms. So 24 plus 28, we're going to get 52 x cubed y, and then we're just going to copy everything else down. I don't notice any other like terms in my polynomial, so I'm just going to copy it all down, and that's my answer. So in this problem, we actually don't need to list all of these terms in order. We can just type this answer in as is because it doesn't ask you to put your polynomial in descending order. So this is fine as is. But best practice in math is if you can order it, when you get to higher levels of math, it's nice to keep everything in order of the highest exponent at the very front of your polynomial, and then all those exponents will start descending as you go. So it's a way to keep everything organized. So what we're going to do is notice how we have a x cubed and a y squared. This term right here has the highest value of exponents, so we're going to put that term at the very front of our polynomial. Then we're going to scan down and we notice that this is an x cubed and y, so let's put that term next. Because again, notice how we have an x cubed, but then our y is descending. That exponent is going from a 2 to a 1, so we want to list that next. And then next we have a x squared and a y, but we also have an x cubed. So let's keep that pattern where we have x cubed and x cubed. And so that means that should be a negative 16x cubed right there. And then now we run out of x cubed, so let's look for an x squared would be the next term. However, this one has a y and this one doesn't, so I'm going to choose to put that 30x squared y next, just because I have an extra variable in that. And then lastly, I'll put that 20x squared. So now this is going to be my final answer. And my polynomial is now in order. This is just best practice. Again, if you want to save time on a standardized test, you might actually choose not to put all your terms in order. So you could just type that first answer that we got without putting everything in order, just to save you a few clicks and a few steps along the way. So that's the solution, and now we just have to enter it into the dialog box. And of course, now that I'm checking my work, I realized I have a incorrect calculation. So even though I told you not to make small errors and to check your work, I didn't check my work. Negative 2 times 10x squared is not positive 20x squared. That should have been a negative. So I almost, after all that work, I almost entered the wrong answer. So that little negative sign would have caused me to get this answer wrong, even though I did all the right steps and I had all of these steps correct up until that small little calculation. So again, take your time, be really careful about those small calculation errors. I've corrected my answer now, so this is actually my final answer. Okay, so you've arrived at your answer, and now the tricky part is typing in your answer. So in equation problems on the CASP, you'll find a dialog box where you can enter your answer, and it can be an equation or actually a number, or in this case, we're entering a polynomial. So we're going to type out the equation using the keypad here. So as you're typing out your answer, just make sure that you know how to use all of these little exponents and little keys right here, and that you're actually checking your work, because it's very easy to click on the wrong button. And notice how I'm typing in a y squared, but now it's all in the exponent. That is an easy mistake to make. So just make sure as you're typing those exponents, you know how to use the keypad on that CASP. The last thing you really want to do is, after finding the solution, to make an error in typing everything out. So it does take a little bit to get used to the keypad. I would recommend taking a practice test, or even just pulling up one practice question and just practicing with that keypad, so you're used to the keystrokes and you're used to how all of this interface works. Just typically when we work with math problems at home, it's usually the solutions are on a piece of paper, and we just turn that in and we don't have to type in anything. So typing equations and typing in something this long can definitely be tricky. So I definitely advise just get used to the testing interface or the curriculum or whatever you have to put your answer in as. And again, after you type everything, I would recommend just checking that you've typed in every number, every negative sign incorrectly. It's also very easy to make a small typo that can also result in a wrong answer. All right, and our next equation type is going to be solving for the equation. So in this equation, we have to find the missing value. In some equation problems, you'll just simply be asked to solve for x. So in this example, enter the value for x that makes the given equation true. All that means is we're solving for x. So 14x minus 3 times 2x minus 2 equals 13 minus 6x. So we're going to need to simplify both sides and then solve for that missing variable. All right, so let's start distributing that negative 3. 14x minus 3 times 2x is negative 6x. Then negative 3 times negative 2 is going to be positive 6 equals 13 minus 6x. All right, so what I notice here is like terms. 14x and 6x are like terms. So what I usually like to do is simplify both sides first separately. So 14x minus 6 is 8x plus 6 equals 13 minus 6x. So from here, I can't simplify the left side anymore, and I can't simplify the right side anymore. So what I'm now going to do is move the variables to one side. So all the x's to one side, and then all the constants to the other side, the right side. So to move that variable, so in order to manipulate an equation, you'll want to, whatever operation you do on the right side, you'll want to do on the left side. So essentially, to move that negative 6x over, we're going to add a 6x to both sides. When we do one thing to one side, we're going to want to do it to both, just so that this eventually becomes a 0. Negative 6x plus positive 6x, that's going to cancel out. So we want to make sure that as we're moving and as we're manipulating, we're not really changing the equation, we're just manipulating it. So 8x plus 6x is 14x plus 6 equals 13. So what I'm going to do now is move that 6 over to the other side with all the constants. So again, what we do to one side, we're going to do to the other side of the equal sign. So we're going to subtract 6 because we want to basically move all of that over. And that's going to give us 14x equals 13 minus 6 is going to be, ooh, help me out here. I haven't done math in a while. All right, 7. So what we're going to now want to do is get x all by itself. So this is 14x. To get 14x by itself, we'll need to divide both sides by that 14. So what we're going to do is divide by 14 on both sides. And what we're going to be left with is x equals 7 over 14. Now, all of your math teachers are saying that is not the final answer. You always want to simplify your fractions. So let's simplify 7 over 14. That's going to give us x equals 1/2. And that is our final answer. Now, when you enter that answer, you can enter it as 1/2 or 0.5. Any of those answers are acceptable. Now, let me read those directions very carefully again. It says enter the value of x that makes the given equation true. It actually doesn't say simplify your answer. So technically, if you entered 7 over 14, it should also be correct. Yeah, so read those questions and directions carefully because sometimes it will say simplify, and then in those cases, they do want you to simplify your answer. So x equals 1/2 or 0.5. In this case, you can enter 1/2 as your answer, or you can actually enter 0.5. Either one is acceptable. The directions don't specify whether you can enter the answer as a decimal or a fraction, so either answer will suffice. All right, so we're going to move up in degree of difficulty for this last practice problem. We're going to write, simplify, and solve the equation. So in this word problem, we're going to write the equation, and then we're going to solve. So in this equation problem, we're going to be asked to write, simplify, and also evaluate our inequality. So we're going to do all the steps we talked about. Some questions just have multi-steps, and you might actually have to perform multiple operations and write your own equation. But don't let that scare you. Let's just take this question one at a time. So a student earns $7.50 per hour at her part-time job, and she wants to earn at least $200. So notice that as I'm reading, I'm highlighting the key terms and numbers, just so that I know for math, usually I will need to pull those numbers once I understand the question. So the next part is enter an inequality that represents all of the possible numbers of hours in H the student could work to meet her goal. Enter your response in the first response box. So what we'll need to do is translate this problem into an inequality. So we know that she makes $7.50 per hour, and at per, what that means is we're multiplying how many hours she works. And we know the variable letter because the problem tells us hours is going to be represented by the letter H. And then we also know that her goal is to earn at least $200. So what that at least translates to is it's going to look like a inequality sign. So she wants to earn at least $200. If she said, I want to earn exactly 200, it would have been an equal sign. If she wants to earn more than, then it would have been a greater than sign. But because she says at least, that means she's fine with earning $200. And she also is fine with earning more than $200. So that's why it's a greater than or equal sign. So let's put that all together. We get 7.5 H greater than or equal to 200. So that is going to be our equation for our first response box. And then we're going to move on to the next part of the question. Enter the least whole number the student needs to work in order to earn at least $200. Enter your response in the second response box. So now we actually have to solve for H. We need to figure out how many hours does she have to actually work to meet her goal. So we'll just divide both sides by 750. And then we'll find out how many hours she actually has to work. And that answer is actually 26.66, and that 6 repeats. So in this case, read the question carefully and the directions carefully. So it says, enter the least whole number. So she cannot, that means this student, oh, I'm assuming it's a she, but, oh, it is a she. So she cannot work part-time shifts. She has to work the full shift. So what that means is we have to round this number of hours she works to the nearest whole number. So the nearest whole number for 26.666666 is going to be 27 hours. She has to work at least 27 hours to meet her goal. So what we're going to do is take that answer and enter it in the second response box. So remember, we want to follow the directions carefully. So the first response box is on top. We're going to enter our equation or our inequality. So it's 750 H is greater than or equal to 200. And then in that second response box, we're going to put 27 hours, and then that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're interested in more math workshops, we have a ton more covering different types of problems and different types of sample questions. Thank you so much for watching.